Well, hello, students. Here we are in week 4 already. And as you know, this is a fully online week. However, it does represent probably one of the most important attributes of this particular course in research because it has to do with sample collection and which involves data collection and analysis. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to go too deeply into stats, but give you a little bit of an understanding of how stats relate to research and the different types of stats that are available to you when you do your research. So the first thing is going back to your chapter 6 and 7. The first thing that they talk about is the research design. And research design is what type of an instrument are we going to use to collect our data? And as you know, data collection feeds into the literature review. How does it do that? Well, what you research in your literature, which supports your goals, which supports your hypotheses, okay, has everything to do with um, the way we collect data, and we integrate that data into our collection of materials that we have gathered together to support the theories that we made, if that makes sense. So there are different types of data samples. And what we want to do is present your particular sample the best way you know how by maybe using charts, tables, different types of descriptive stats without getting too deep into it. Remember, your research is only to validate your findings that whatever you've done or you're doing, somebody somewhere has at least started doing that, even if you came up with something new or has accomplished it somewhere else. You know that yourself, and when when you do a Google search on anything under the sun. So we want to be able to select an appropriate statistical tool for the research variables that we choose. So again, the first thing is to anticipate how the design of the sample instrument is going to be. And that's going to be based on what type of data collection and analysis tools are we going to use to support that particular research. Okay? The other thing is knowing recognizing the different levels of data for analysis. Okay? Business is predominantly made up of different units, what we call business units. And most decisions are made at the margin. At the margin means how far do we go before we have to go any further in simple language. So we're essentially going to be comparing and contrasting qualitative, which is, of course, data that we look up that's based on our experience, and quantitative, hard data, hard research to back up what we are looking to do in our particular sample. And we're going to be talking about nominal data, which is the second level of data collection, and ordinal data. Okay? We're going to be looking at ratio data. Now, I'm not saying you're going to use all of these or even more than 2 or 3 of these, or maybe just one of them. I don't know, depending on what sample size you're looking at and what type of research you're doing. The next thing we're going to talk about is maybe creating a data matrix, coding and entering data for computerized statistical analysis. And, I remember when I was doing my research for my doctorate, I used SPSS, and that is a great analytical template tool that you can use to create your samples. Now, again, I'm not saying you're going to need to go that far, but if you're looking to maybe look at samples that are backed up by age, salary, qualifications, and that type of thing, demographic samples, you may want to look at that. And then we're going to be looking at different types of tables and histograms. Will we go that far? Do you need that much? Not necessarily. But also, if you're doing any type of analysis on where you were, where you are, where you're going with your research, then you certainly want to consider doing some type of a histogram for your study. So again, these are just food for thought on selecting the appropriate statistical tools we're going to need for creating our research variables, okay? Moving on to chapter 7. All right, that's basically chapter 6. But chapter 7 is basically trying to help us overcome the difficulties associated with developing a questionnaire. We're going to talk a lot about that. I'll put a few YouTube videos about putting a questionnaire together. Like for our sample, what are the appropriate questions that we're going to need for our sample instrument? And what range of questions are we going to use? Are we going to be getting opinions where we would use a Likert scale to measure our particular answers? We want to look at questionnaires that are going to be appropriate solely to the study that we are doing. And that is all going to feed into the research design. Is our research going to be more qualitative than quantitative? And what type of data are we going to need if it's quantitative? So again, I'm going to be putting a lot of things up there for you to look at, videos. Don't want you to get really bogged down in a lot of statistical stuff, but know how you can use statistics, certain types of statistics, to demonstrate, to evaluate, to exemplify and present the validity of your research. But remember, we talked about this in the first class. We talked about the scope and limitation of our research. You're not researching the planet. You're only talking about your world. So make sure what you research and the instrument that you develop will be created within 1 week of a 7-week time frame. Okay? These are all building blocks of writing a paper. Remember, week 1, we developed the hypotheses. Week 1 and 2, we looked at the literature review. Okay? Week 3, we're going to be talking, we talked about creating, the design of what type of a sample instrument are we going to be needing. Week 4, now we're talking about the design of the different types of data we can use to focus in on what we need on that instrument. So again, a lot of stuff. I'm going to be putting things up there for you to read, a lot of YouTube videos. I'm going to be creating your AS1, AS2, and so forth, and it should not be very difficult for you to get through this week. Okay? Have a wonderful week.